On behalf of Westchester Radio Air Modelers, I'd like to thank everyone who was a part of and benefited from and knew Frank. We're going to be doing one or two things this afternoon involving you, the family, and kind of indirectly with Frank himself. I'm going to start by asking Lou Scarlino to say a few words, and I'm going to invite the current members of the WRAM to step up and give us their remembrances, and then the family as well. So, Lou, go ahead.
Thank you, Fred. In 1992, in May, we dedicated this field to Frank. And as many of you know, the field wouldn't have been here if it wasn't for Frank. And at the time, I made a comment to the effect that Frank was one of the two most honorable men I had ever met in my life. I knew it was going to happen.
It's all right, Lou.
I had to write it down because I knew I was going to blow it if I didn't. More than that, Frank was, as we all are. We have our faults, and as many of you who know him closely, Frank could be one stubborn man. When he didn't want to do something, he just didn't do it. But the attributes that so few of us have that were personified with Frank could be stated in two words: duty and honor. Frank mentored me to take over the show. He really worked with me for a very, very long time. And the first year I was responsible for running the show, Frank's mother died. And Frank, with Shirley, left the show for 2 hours to go to his mother's funeral and came back because he didn't want to leave me hanging there, not knowing what to do. That's who Frank was. He was a person you could count on come hell or high water. Whether you were 1,000 miles away and you called him for help, he'd be there in a flash. If he were in a foxhole next to you, he would never leave. He was a man of great integrity, a man I loved, and frankly, I don't know anyone who can compare to him that I've known in my life, and I am going to miss him something fierce. Frank, I wanted to make sure wherever you are that you and Jim knew how much your father, how proud he was of you and how much he loved you guys. There were times when we'd be out together at the show, when we were out fishing up in Canada. His comments were, you know, I wish I had a father that had said the things to me, said those things about me to someone else.
I wish
And
he
he
said
did.
it to me.
He should have sent them to you, you're right. Isn't it true? Isn't it true?
But he could say it to us,
I knew his actions, believe me.
right?
Well, this is a celebration of Frank's life. He loved this field. And I am so happy that the family consented to have his ashes, and I found out today some of Shirley's as well to be distributed on this field in their remembrances, because Frank and Shirley were peas in a pod. We loved them dearly. And I'm going to miss them, and I know most of us will. And gosh, thank you all so much for coming. God.
Even though I'm not a WRAM member, I'm not a WRAM member.
Yes, you are.
First of all, I'd like to acknowledge Shirley, who was my dear friend, who was my partner in crime, she was my gambling partner in Las Vegas. I mean, whenever we were together, we sort of were crazy, and we hit it off together. So you say without Frank, so much wouldn't be done. But Shirley was by his side when there was no computer, shoving things in envelopes, writing things. It's months and months and months and months of work to do that show that supported this field so that all you guys could fly. She was there with a never complaining, always with a smile, always with a laugh. Whoever worked with her in the swap shop or anywhere else loved her. And so she really, should be considered part of this club and should be acknowledged for what she contributed. Because without her, she was right behind Frank with everything. And I miss her terribly, and I have for a very long time. And Frank was my good friend too. And when he had a couple of beers, he'd come into the kitchen, and he'd tell me a few things that he might not tell me if he didn't have those couple of beers. So, but I also want to say that there were two people in my whole life, other than family, that I knew that if I called them from anywhere on this earth at any time of the day or night, and I just said, I need you, without any explanation, that they would be there. I never had to do it, but I knew I could, and that Frank was one of them. And the other one was Lou's other very good friend who died a year ago. So, thank you, Shirley, and thank you for me.
My name is Danny. I met Frank when I was a WRAM volunteer at 11 years old, and of course it was Mr. DeVore back then. When I turned about 20 years old, he said, Danny, you can call me Frank now. Okay, Frank. I'll call you Frank. And we had tenant meetings at the Sloan Kettering Hall many years back in the mid-'80s, and we started as a special group of guys. Another dear friend, my first mentor, Joe Schmidt. And we go to the Lions Club there for a beer, and he'd say, how many Budweisers? We had a fellow who worked the bar there, and he was always coming out. Every Friday we go to there, and every year that I'd see Frank, first thing he'd say to me is, how many Budweisers? And we laugh a little bit. But I think the most important thing I want to say is about Frank, about aging, and life, and learning. Well, I learned about people. There's something about Frank that you loved and admired. Keep that in your life. Be that kind of person, and he'll live in your hearts. He'll never be gone. So take something you learned from him and admire it and love it, and think of him. And that's what we want for all of us. Thank you.
I also got to know Frank as a result of the show and joining the Rams a number of years ago, and everything that's been said about him is absolutely true. When we ran the show at the county center, Frank, even though he was not here, used to do all the setups. If you look around here, we talk about the field, but there's nothing that pertains to the Ram that Frank wasn't involved in, even through our shirts, our hats, and so on. This is where the finances came through that show that enabled us to have such a beautiful field. Even when he moved to South Carolina, he made it an annual event to come up here and help us. And if any of you people have worked the show or been involved with the show, if there was ever a problem, the first man on the scene, aside from Lou, was Frank to try to square it away. As I said, he did all the layouts for us. I mean, Jim Honorato and I were down there one day going by Frank's diagram, and we couldn't figure out how the booths were set up. And finally, it was determined that the county center plan was off, not Frank's. And, the last couple of years I worked at the swap shop, and there was always a good cold beer for Frank. He came around every afternoon for that one at the end of the day.
At a certain time, it had to be a certain time back here, right? What was it, 12 or 1? 11 or 12, one of those two.
That'd be after 11.
Yeah, after 11.
He was a man that I really looked up to, very quiet man, and it was a privilege knowing him, and thank you to the family for sharing him with us all of these years.
I've known Frank probably 46 years, I think it is. I've known Frank. And, you couldn't meet a more honest person, a more trustworthy person, a person that would do anything for you if he could do it. okay? If anybody had anything to solidify the show in the beginnings, it was probably Frank. He did all the layouts and everything for many, many years for the show. As Lou said, he even came up in his twilight years to come up and work at the show and help out Lou. It was a tremendous person, this thing. And also his wife Shirley was a wonderful person.
My name's Ray Windus. I've been a member with the Rams for probably 50 years, give or take one or two. Known Frank all that time. And I have some side stories. There's no question of what Frank did for this club, for this field, and for the show. And there's two things about the show that I love greatly about Frank. If you had an assignment that was yours to do, he didn't meddle. Of course, he had that eye, and he could look, and he could see things from afar. As long as things were going okay, you didn't hear from him. If things weren't going okay, get one of these. Can't go up the side. What's up, Frank? You need two? I need mark them right off for me. But I had another privilege that perhaps many of you did not have. Frank was the building inspector for the village of Mamaroneck. At about the same time, I was the building inspector for the village of North Tarrytown. So we had a lot of phone calls and conversations here at the field about such things in the municipal world. We had something else in common. Two sons, each playing in athletics in the Westchester County area during that same time. And we had those conversations. So it was a pleasure to come to the field after he did his, and he waved to a couple of people who had some things to do. Then we'd talk about the field, the show, the assignments, the boys who he loved greatly, and the general family situation. So, A, we were privileged, and we're privileged to be here today to hear all these comments. And on top of all that, thank you, Frank and Shirley, for everything you did for us in a family way, in a municipal way, in a Rams way, and in the show way. Thank you.
I'm Kurt Chilton. I just want to tell you a quick story that shows what kind of guy Frank was. When I was new to this club and just learning to fly, I had a 3-channel SIG Cadet. I was flying it over here one day and I had a mid-air collision and the rudder got sheared off and the plane spiraled into those trees down there. Well, you know, I was just nobody in the club and Frank was a big deal. But Frank said, let me get it for you. And he climbed the tree and retrieved my plane. Thank you.
No question about that.
Anyone else?
Well, I've been with this club for a long time. Seems like as long as my dad. You know, the early days of the show, putting up curtains and licking envelopes, and my mom did complain a little bit. So. Other than that, he loved this club with all his heart. He gave his soul to it. He would love to be here right now, especially with that great big new plane he has. I mean, he loved his family, his work, and his club. That was his life. I don't know what to say.
I just have one more comment. A short while ago, Steele and I were listening to an NPR program, and the person said, you don't really die until your name is spoken for the last time. And that really struck me, and that's probably true for most people. After a while, everyone you know, everyone you've been acquainted with is gone, and your name is never spoken again. But Frank's name will be, because as long as we have this field, and that plaque is there, someone's going to read his name.
I go back 48, 49 years remember when my kids and Frank's kids used to play at the field. When I was thinking of Frank before coming up here today, for some reason, Jack Armstrong, the All-American boy, came to mind. And he was that to me. He taught me how to behave in this hobby. When I was brand new at it, most of us were flying rudder only and with escapements and whatever. And Frank had won or been awarded what he then called with awe a multi. It was huge. It must have had a 60-inch wingspan. And on the maiden flight, it totaled. And I watched Frank with total dignity, showing very little emotion, behave absolutely perfectly. And this was after watching the histrionics that usually went on with lesser airplanes at the school. He was, I never heard him use an unkind word to anybody, ever, no matter how inane or stupidly they behaved. He was a true gentleman.
I just wanted to say something real quick about the two of them, because I probably have known Frank longer than I think people here, because I was probably around 11 or 12 when they first started going together in high school. Frank had a little black book of all of the girls that he would date. And I don't know if he graded them or not, but that was his little black book. And Shirley was a junior and Frank was a senior, and Shirley had dated, other boys and such. But then the two of them started going together, I guess was the term back in those days. And there was not another entry after Shirley's name. So that's how long they've been together and how long I've known them. And I can't talk anymore. This is my son,
I just wanted to say another thing. That's my mother there, my two sisters over there. And we lived in Greenwich up until I was in 8th grade, and then we moved up to Old Sabre, Connecticut. And we always spent the holidays together. We always looked forward to going down to Larchmont, Thanksgiving and Christmas, seeing Frankie and Jimmy and Aunt Shirley and Uncle Frank. And Uncle Frank actually walked my sister down the aisle because we all grew up without a father. And talking about the Ram show after his mother died, we were at the house, and I must have been 4th grade, and I knew the show was going on, and I wanted to go. And my mom was saying, his mother just died, I'm not sure if he's going to be able to take you and everything, I understand, he may not be able to, but sure enough, he found it in his time and that weekend to bring me over to the show. He couldn't walk around with me, but he got Bob Fauché to take me around the show to all the exhibitors. And when I was there, Mr. Fauché kept saying, you know who this is? You know who this is? This is Frank DeVore's nephew. Oh, hi, how you doing? Take this, take that, take all these catalogs, do this, do that. And, I live in Granby now, which is in northern Connecticut, but, since Uncle Frank and Aunt Shirley did move down to South Carolina, I'd always go down to the Ram shows, see them in the swap shop, because, that was the only time we could see them. And, I don't fly too much anymore, but, and get down to the Ram show maybe every 2 or 3 years, but, I'll make sure I keep going down, and it'll be a way for me to remember Uncle Frank and Aunt Shirley.
Anyone else wish to speak a few words?
How was he as your boss? Come on, girls.
Come on. He was a good boss. He had all those qualities. He was a
Okay,
gentleman,
let me then make
kind.
one last comment. I represent the current generation of RAM members. The first time I saw Frank DeVore, I knew he was someone of importance because he was moving at about 3 times faster than anybody else was moving during the show. And this was quite a while back when I had hair, somewhat taller and maybe not as handsome. But I remember saying, this gentleman has to do something with the show. I wasn't even a member. It just happened to go by the show booth many moons ago. And he looked like he knew what he was doing. And I remember he looked like he cared about what he was doing. Now we're looking at quite a number of years have gone by. I'm privileged to be a member of the Rams. I'm privileged to be the president of the Ram. I'm privileged to have known him only too briefly. And to the newer members of the club, to the individuals who are interested, who are here today, understand that you are inheriting the legacy of individuals like Frank DeVore. This is something that cannot die. This is something that we cannot let pass. The hobby is growing. There are more challenges every day. We're trying to meet them as best we can. It's up to us, along with those who have come before us, and hopefully those who will come after us, to keep the legacy alive. It's a great hobby. Men like Frank make it even better. And again, on behalf of the club, myself, my thanks to the family for being here and for helping Frank help us. I understand we have Frank's ashes with us. I would ask the members...
Shirley.
And Shirley, I'm sorry. Frank and Shirley's ashes. I'm going to ask the membership to line up at the orange safety fence, and I would invite Frank's family to bring the ashes out to the center of the field for distribution. As they distribute the ashes, I would ask for a moment or two of silence, please. Frank's family that care to step forward onto the field, please do so. Frank?
I hate you trying this draft.
A never-ending fight. Gentlemen, I would ask that you all take your cover off and observe a moment of silence, please.